welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at BTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the economic situation of the country, especially in light of the upcoming budget. Of course, this is going to be a very important time for not just the country, but of course also the government, who is hanging in balance with regards to how it is going to proceed further in terms of the tough economic measures that it would have to take in light of the current economic situation and, of course, the discussions with the IMF and the demands that it puts forward. So we're going to, of course, be closely monitoring what the government is planning ahead and what sort of numbers it's looking at for this budget. What it says is going to be people-friendly. However, of course, there is also a lot of concern with regards to the IMF demands being put forward and the kind of balance that the government will have to strike between the two. Of course, also protecting its own political developments and the way that it's going to be viewed by the nation. Of course, also trying to alleviate the already burdened nation from more economic burdens, and of course balancing with the IMF as well in terms of its demands and moving forward with another extended fund facility. So we're going to take a look at all of this in light of the way that we've seen previous economic developments evolve and the way that we want the government to move forward to keeping in view the current economic conditions. We're also going to be taking a closer look at what this means, especially within Pakistan in terms of divisions between the center and the province, and what sort of budgets will we be looking at both at the center and the provincial governments, with of course KP already announcing its own budget last week and taking a lot of measures which of course with the federal government not really putting forward a financial plan yet. So we're going to be taking a look at that as well in light of the consequences that it has or the repercussions it will have on the numbers of the budget, and how exactly will then this will be monitored in light of the IMF demands and how the provinces and center will need to cooperate amongst themselves. So we're going to be taking a look at that in our show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by our guest Dr. Nasir Iqbal, who's a senior economist, and Dr. Ali Salman, executive director Prime. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion. And Dr. Ali, I'll start with you with reference to the kind of reports that we're hearing in. Of course, in a few days, most likely we will have more clarity in terms of the numbers that the government seems to be proposing regarding the budget. But so far, we know that this is going to be a difficult balance that the government will have to strike, and they have pointed towards a people-friendly budget. But in your perspective, what do you think that will mean, and what sort of probabilities exist in terms of the room that we have to be able to take such measures, given, of course, the IMF demands that we already know exist, and, of course, with the direction that we want to take with this one?
Thank you so much, Hasana, for inviting me into this important discussion. My view is that to begin with, although the underlying premise seems to be that there is a dichotomy or contradiction between, let's say, the IMF expectations or demands and the government, which is a democratic government representing people's will. But I would like to point out, at least in the short run, there are more compatibilities between the IMF expectation, IMF demands, and what you are referring to as people-friendly budget, at least in the short run. And I would especially like to mention two things here, which will be in the key drivers of the next IMF program. First thing is that there is an expectation and demand from IMF to reduce public spending, particularly control the spending on SOEs. According to the Ministry of Finance, if you calculate a total exposure of SOEs in terms of the sovereign debt guarantees and the subsidies and other expenditures, this has already reached to 10% of GDP. Now, this is huge, and if you want to provide a relief to the people of Pakistan, then you would like to spend their hard, earned money and hard collect taxes, on those SOEs. You don't want to spend good money after the bad assets. So I think if we move towards that direction, it will at least provide some cushion to the people in terms of reduced demands of the taxation, but also broadly speaking in terms of giving more opportunities for the private sector to get in to the economic cycle. Because when the government is in the business, then it reduces the chances for the people and the private sector to do the business. So I think we need to look at it from that perspective, that where are the common, like the agreements between the people-friendly budget and the IMF-driven budget. And second aspect I would like to highlight is a related point where we are, when we talk about primary surplus, the government is, the current situation is that we have a slight a surplus, and I think the government would like to maintain it in next fiscal year by increasing the revenue at the federal level, but also by controlling the expenditure. Again, that will provide some degree of cushion to the government to maintain, if not completely a balanced budget, but at least in terms of the primary deficit, it shall be reduced. Those are my opening thoughts on the IMF and government approach to budget.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Nasir, I want your perspective on the same as well, especially in terms of the possibilities that exist of aligning between what the government would plan to do in terms of alleviation of people's burdens and, of course, the IMF. How much synergy do you think exists?
I think we should be very clear whenever there is a budget, there is nothing for the common people. So if we are looking for like 13 trillion and 12 to 13 trillion tax, we have to increase taxes. So, and the further we have to, as Ali said, we have to reduce the subsidies. So this is the one part of budget. So the other part that we really need to work on is the expenditure side. So the IMF is silent on the expenditure side. They are mainly concerned with the tax side as well as the subsidy. So on both ends, there is nothing for the common people. So there is no synergy on that end. But we can create a synergies. One, they are looking for, as Ali Salman said, a primary surplus, and also to some extent the reduction in the overall deficit. How we can do that? This is a big question for government. And that could be done by rationalizing our expenditure. So government has to look into the expenditure side as well, how we can minimize. So there are a lot of avenues where the government can really work, and by reducing those expenditure, they can actually give subsidy, they can give incentive to common people. By imposing more tax, by reducing subsidy, there is no incentive for common people, but reducing government expenditure, rationalizing the government expenditure. I just had a meeting in the planning commission on the next year budget. So they are talking a lot of things that looks good, but what about the implementation of those things? So they said that we didn't go for a much new investment in the PSDPE, but we have to rationalize the existing PSDPE. But can they do it with the political setup? These are all the big questions. So IMF is only looking for the tax increase. How we can do it, it's up to the government of Pakistan. They are looking for substantial reduction in subsidies to minimize the circular debt and other leakages. So how we can do it? Either we can go for privatization, either we increase the efficiency of our administrative structure to reduce the losses. So these are some sort of like gambling situation in the coming budget. So if we really have to create a balance, we need a lot of thinking. And what kind of thinking is there at the government level, we shall see in the coming weeks and days.
Right.
Yeah, Sana, with your permission, wanted to go towards Dr. Ali once more. Dr. Ali, as Dr. Nasir has rightly pointed out that, of course, if we want to balance the situation, of course, we have to, balance it through putting extra efforts or with the effect of policies. Can we say that them policies should be related to increasing the growth of the economy, so that when economy is growing in the sectors like business sectors and manufacturing sector, in them sectors, if extra efforts are being put and them sectors are being subsidized, can we say that we will come in a position in which we can say that our economy is sustainable and it is improving, and in that context this budget, the upcoming budget, can be considered as a people friendly budget?
Well, if I get your point correctly, Raja Faisal, you were saying that how the government can use the budget for growth. So first of all, I agree that ultimately we need sustained long-term growth. There cannot be two opinions about that. And second is that in our long-term trend of growth is unfortunately downward. So we have to reverse this trend first of all. There is absolutely no doubt. Now, the point which you are raising, the question is an important one, and that is how do we use budget to actually, let's say, incentivize the growth in some business sectors. And I think part of the problem lies. Because you will see that this government, like all the previous government, will try to tinker through selective tax incentives or other monetary incentives in some sectors, and without looking at the competitiveness of the sectoral growth or of the firms or our potential in the international market. Whenever we use the budget to select or tinker sectoral growth, we are actually promoting some level of protectionism, which may be a good news for one or two sectors, but it is not generally a good news for the economy overall. So I would like to see a budget in which I would say it should be a sector neutral budget. So budget and tax measures should not be looking at one sector over another sector. The budget and taxation should be looking at how much government do we need, what kind of services do we need the government to provide to its people, and then align people. The growth is largely a subject of the private sector, firms, and individuals. Government, by reducing its size, and I would like to acknowledge PIDE here for its extensive research. So government plays its role in that manner by facilitation. But growth is largely a function of the private sector, and keeping its size, limited, and by keeping the deficit to a limited level, I think government would indirectly support the growth process. But I would say not by tinkering the incentives structure through the budget measures.
Right. Dr. Nasir, I also want your perspective in terms of when we talk about the overall budget and, of course, the way that the government will move forward. There is also, of course, then how provincial governments will take that budget forward. And keeping political views aside, I also want to understand how exactly will there be more collaboration on that front as well. Even if we take out what has happened in KP, there is, of course, a need for that to be aligned with whatever the federal government actually comes out with, and the numbers that are needed for especially development projects within the provinces, and how provincial governments will need to step up. So what do you foresee on that, and what sort of aspects will be important in this?
Yeah, thank you. First, I'll add a couple of things on the growth-oriented budget. So, of course, we need a growth-oriented budget. But whenever we are in the IMF program, it would be very difficult to have even growth, like a real growth, more than 3%. It would be very difficult. But here is the challenge for the government. What government can do, on the one hand, they can, of course, we have to live with the IMF, so we have to meet the conditionality of the IMF, and we have to increase taxes, we have to reduce the subsidies. But on the other side, Ali very rightly mentioned, and PIDE also advocating on the role of private sector and the facilitation part by the government. So the growth could be enhanced even under the IMF program if we really go for these type of reforms, where we can basically give a leverage to private sector, we can facilitate the private sector, and also create an ease of doing business. So this is very crucial for us, because over the last 3 to 5 years, we are running a negative growth. In the real term, it's a negative growth. Even if the 2%, 2.5% growth, still it's a negative growth in terms of after adjusting the population. The another important question that you raise is the role of provinces. So the first, the federal should be clear should take a very decisive decision after 18th Amendment. What type of ministries are function dissolved to provinces? They first eliminate all those kind of administrative function at the federal level. So this could be the first key responsibility of the federal government. They start by removing all kind of extra department, ministries at the federal level. That is substantially put some sort of burden on the provinces to at least use their resources optimally in terms of providing those services, especially the health services, education services, and also the infrastructure. On the other hand, if we really have to make responsible provinces after this NFC award, though it would be very difficult, we should have to come up with the institutional or some sort of constitutional arrangement. Currently, we don't have any kind of like strict compliance to provinces to increase their tax base, to increase the tax collection, or to broaden the tax structure, because they are getting enough money from the federal, and federal is responsible to give at least the minimum that they gave the last year. So this is the one of the restriction that they have. So there is like a political economy on the federal level as the provincial level. So if the federal become clear what kind of function they have to perform, maybe they keep like a very small number of ministries they needed, and then the remaining would be the provinces, and they are getting enough money from the under the NFC award. Even if there is no change in the coming year on the NFC structure, still federal can like impose or to restrict these provinces to come up with their own viable budget. So this time what KP did is to announce their budget, and in the future they are like looking for some sort of own debt structure. Still it would be very tricky, because ultimately it would be the responsibility of the Pakistan, not the individual province, to repay the entire stuff. So how we can calculate the debt to GDP ratio in the coming years and so on, when the provinces have their own debt. So these are all real challenges, and we are not even willing to debate these issues, because there is no willingness either at the federal level, either at the province level, because all parties are happy. They are getting enough resources from the federal. They don't need to come on the table. So unless we define a mechanism to start negotiations, to start discussion. But the first step, I think, maybe I'm wrong, should be taken by the federal by eliminating all additional ministries, by eliminating all additional departments. Just keep only 3 to 5 ministries. Those are under the domain of the federal government. Then there is and that will also help to rationalize the development budget as well.
Right, absolutely. And there's some very interesting things that I want to explore further, particularly in terms of the political dimensions of this aspect, and then, of course, expenditure control. But I'll come to that later. But Farrukh, before that, I want to talk about something that Dr. Nasir actually started off with, talking about how the budget is perhaps no good for the common man, or is not meant for the common man. But I want to understand then, of course, whenever we talk about the budget, or whenever the public or the general population is actually looking for the budget, we're of course looking for what that means for us in terms of our daily lives, in terms of our salaries, in terms of the taxes we have to pay, in terms of our buying powers. And so of course that is really important in terms of impact. So when we take a look at this budget, there may be like larger concerns that we're talking about. What will be the impact for us?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I thought you will never ask. But given that there has been a lot of realism, right, in this program, let me try to actually shake off my usual profile of an eternal pessimist and talk about some hopeful things.
Great.
I think at this moment, what we are going through is called, Seth Godin actually calls it the dip. Whenever you are in a sport and you are about to actually win, before that there comes a time when you are exhausted. Fatigue sets in and you think that you are going to lose or you are going to drop the ball, right? At that moment, if you master yourself, you succeed. So I think that we have been actually working very hard as a state to ensure that Pakistan A remains in the program with the IMF. B also tries to actually carry out certain kind of reforms that we have been committing to. A lot of homework has been done, right? With due respect, this idea that this has to be pro-poor or entire poor budget, I'm sorry, budget is budget. It only means balancing books, right? You have to take care of the expenditure and you have to actually take care of the inflows. But now what is happening is that I have this feeling, by the way, that given that the kind of tricky situation we started the IMF program with, remember they wanted control of SBP, the State Bank of Pakistan. They wanted all our accounts to actually merge into one account, and there was such dire demands at the start that it seemed impossible. From there, because there was no trust, since then we have really worked hard to earn that trust. That SBA that we concluded is a proof that we want to be good children, good kids, right? Because of that, I think that IMF will demand certain sacrifices, but it will not take it. For example, if it keeps on talking about enhancing your inflows by increasing your taxation system or reforming it, there is a concern about expenditure also. And as was pointed out, there are many aspects in which we can do much. For example, SOEs keep on gobbling up huge amount of money from the public exchequer. Similarly, PSDP and ADP, both of these are very important to be reformed because a lot of money goes through to waste, right? Similarly, pensions are a huge concern all over the world, and pension reform has to eventually take place. Then we can talk about reprofiling the debt also, because Pakistan is going to engage with both China and America, and then there is going to be more investment coming to the country also. We heard the UAE's head actually committing to investing $10 billion. With that kind of a situation, I think that in coming days we will not have as much pressure on us as we have endured for past 5-6 years. Having said that, of course, we have to actually focus on the reforms that we commit to, but I think that usually job creation is how you actually ensure that there is some relief to the poor. Pakistani economy has been shrinking. Pakistan has been actually going through a stagflation, no jobs but high inflation. With that kind of a situation, the poor got poorer. But now, I think with these investment opportunities and at least some nominal balancing of the book, because the government on paper has actually brought many good ideas, and that there we know about SOEs, we know about restructuring PSDP, we know about various other aspects. So I think that in coming days, investment will ensure that there is enough job creation to take care of the masses. And once job creation takes place, Sana, regardless whether there is a positive growth or there is equal maintenance, right? Even then you might be able to take care of a lot of people because of the trickle-down effect, because of the economic activity in the economy.
Right. Faisal, I want your perspective in terms of the political dynamics that we discussed earlier as well, especially when we take a look of the kind of political challenges that the government is facing, the repercussions that it might have to face also, and of course the pressures on the party in this regard with reference to other political parties, and then also in light of that, what has happened in KP and whether or not that points towards increased friction that might exist, particularly on important economic decisions that we'll have to take, and how then will this be balanced in light of the larger economic concerns of the country?
Sana, obviously when it comes to friction within the political spectrum of Pakistan, of course it is always dangerous and it needs to be taken care of. And I mean, we very well know that since almost 2 years we have been seeing this friction in Pakistan, and majority of the problems which our economy is facing right now, they owe to that friction. And we know that there are certain saner voices around us who are, echoing the sort of, all of the political sides and all of the stakeholders, all of the powerful hubs, all of them, they have to sit down together, because this is the time when Pakistan is facing challenges, and them challenges are of course related to economy and our political stability. At the same time, all of the stakeholders, they need to sit together and they need to find a way forward, and that way forward should only be in a positive way, so that keeping in mind that that way forward is going to define the future of 230 million people of Pakistan, and the kind of problems which are being faced. They have the solution, but of course we know that there is one party that of course is still sort of in the friction mode. Dialogue can bring them back on the table, and dialogue can actually make them sit with the Constitution Avenue and all of the powerful hubs, and that's the way forward. When it comes to KP government, we know that there is lots of rhetoric when it comes to speeches made by Chief Minister of KP, but at the same time, when we see him sitting in the power corridors of Constitution Avenue, he has entirely a different perspective about the way things are moving, and he is in a sort of serious mode to, of course, sit down and fix the things with with his colleagues, and he himself is willing to sit down to find a way forward. To me, I think dialogue is the way forward, and that is the only solution to all of the problems which are being faced by Pakistan right now. Political friction must end, so that we can achieve a sustainable growth, a sustainable economy of Pakistan, and that in that way, of course, jobs can be created, and then opportunities can be created for people at large. And when people at large would be finding ways to earn money in Pakistan, eventually they would be finding that the inflation is just a word which is not affecting them at all.
Right.
Right. Very
yes,
quickly,
sir.
I just wanted to actually smuggle in a couple of sentences regarding federation and federating units relationship. My humble summation is that perhaps we take, we get overwhelmed by this friction. Remember that in any federation, the friction between federation and federating units, or between federating units, is inbuilt. New Delhi in India just demanded that certain provinces, actually, or states, release more water because there's so much heat in the New Delhi, right? In America also, there's huge competition between states. Our problem is that perhaps because we over dramatize everything, or perhaps because somehow we have become a picture of Dorian Gray when it comes to India, that we end up actually eating ourselves up for no reason. Of course, there's going to be politics. Of course, there's going to be theatrics. But doesn't mean that it is going to have a negative impact, because in the end, it is in the interest of the federating units and the federation to actually work in tandem and work in harmony.
Absolutely. Dr. Ali, I want your perspective on something that was discussed earlier with regards to expenditure control, and Dr. Nasir also pointed towards doing away with ministries, and we hear this conversation oftentimes when we talk about controlling expenditures and moving with austerity measures, and I want an understanding of how much of an impact does that actually create in terms of the overall budget and the overall economy, and how important would that be, and if so, why hasn't this been done before, if it's something that is very obvious or simple to do? Secondly, I also want your perspective in terms of tax collection. The policies earlier that the government, of course, has put forward with wholesalers and retailers is something that we've seen previously also not been being successful in the country, and perhaps even this time around not being the kind of not getting the kind of feedback that we were of course hoping for. So in terms of actually bringing them under the tax now, what do you propose can also be done in this regard, or whether or not the approach can be different if we're looking for success?
And Dr. Ali, if you can also indulge me, if, for example, because we keep on trying to repeat the same thing over and over, and it doesn't give results, if somehow the retailers don't cooperate, the question then is, of course, we are going to go for increase in GST. Is there a way to actually go for a VAT mode when it comes to GST, so that at least we have documentation?
Right. Well, first of all, I think the politics always have the temptation of derailing us from economics, and that happens national level, and we see it here also. But I think we should not disregard it totally, because the political economy is driving a lot of economic decisions also. And that is the case with the expenditure question you mentioned, Sana. So you're right that a lot of discussion has been on closing down the many federal ministries, as Dr. Nasir also highlighted. This was also presented as one of the manifesto by Bilawal Bhutto, that if he becomes the prime minister, he would shut down 17 or so ministries, and it will save, according to the numbers presented, about 300 billion rupees annually. Now, in the larger scheme of things, I'm afraid this is not going to make a dent. This will help. I would definitely agree, but this will not make a dent. Because, as I mentioned, the larger, the bigger hole in terms of expenditure is actually somewhere else, where the state-owned enterprises and also the energy sector leakages. So those are the big two holes when it comes to expenditure control, where we need to take drastic measures. Just to give you one example, which is a positive example, but unfortunately people don't seem to appreciate that a lot. Talk about energy sector crisis, talk about circular debt, for instance, which is touching about 3 trillion rupees. The only entity which is not contributing to the circular debt is Karachi Electric, K Electric. And that is the only entity which was, of course, privatized about 20 years ago. So there is an example which we need to follow, but we are not ready to follow. And instead, what we are doing is
circular debt. Dr. Ali, there's circular debt, and then there's circular headache.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, when we talk about the ministries, the headlines, they're again on the wrong direction. They are not looking at the solution. Let me say that respectfully, that the Prime Minister made an announcement that he has sacked all the boards of directors of discos, which was just, I would say, a newspaper headline which does not get endorsement even by his own cabinet. So we don't need to take those measures which are going to make no impact. We need to take real steps. Now, the other aspect is the tax collection, and the recent numbers of released by the government suggests that about 20,000 retailers have registered finally in this Tajer Dost scheme out of 3 million enterprises. Okay, there is some progress from 200, which was the number which was provided to us a month ago. But you see, the idea is that unless the government is going to rationalize its tax rates, any amount of incentives, any amount of even threats is going to fail. It's a futile activity when there is absolute level of lack of trust between the tax collectors and the taxpayer, and then you are not ultimate of taxation, whether it is the GST or the income tax. Theoretically, we are in a VAT mode. but the supply chain is broken. Therefore, we are failing to implement the system in our country. Uh, Tier one retailers are there. Eight or 10,000 have been registered in tier one. So these are really, minuscule in terms of what we really need to achieve in terms of the coverage or tax base. So I think going forward, I see there's a lot of potential in the GST as a revenue mobilizer in the country, and there is enough evidence around in different countries that they have by bringing the rate down, not bringing the rate down to 8 to 10%. Actually, the coverage has been increased significantly, and revenue. Ultimately, government is concerned about revenue has been increased also. Unfortunately, the news we are hearing very lately is that the government is considering to increase the tax rate, the GST rate by 1%. Now, this is going to be not only problematic from the inflation point of view, but also it is not going to be helpful from a tax base point of view. All kind of these schemes have been foiled by the business community, and I do not blame them because they are not getting the incentives in place. You still have that filers, non-filers distinction as a policy design. So essentially, we are looking for tax collection, but look where the tax collection is coming from in reality. The tax collection is coming from imports. Almost 55% of the revenue in the tax is being collected at the level of import, not just through import duties, but also advanced taxes collected at level of port. So that is, again, a deeply flawed policy. And I would hope that the government takes some, measures which are significant and, which are also drastic in nature. Not just tinkering with one sector or another sector, but drastic in nature, giving a clear signal that government wants to change. And I believe that if the signal is provided by the government, the private sector would also follow through, and our tax collection will ultimately improve. But I think that the discussion has to start from the expenditure side, where we were discussing before in the first part of the program, and then has to follow from the collection side. So both aspects of the budget or revenue management have to be brought down together.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Nasir, I want your perspective on this as well, but add to that the discussion on import duties. Also, there was some reported news coming in with reference to possibilities of actually looking in revoking the ban on import duties with regards to raw materials. And I want your take on what this means in general as well, and the way that we would want to proceed further, especially in terms of increasing exports or incentivizing the manufacturing of materials within our country, and how we move towards more indigenization in this respect when we talk about import duties.
And Dr. Nasir, if you can also shed light on, talking about incentives. I mean, there is a country, Bangladesh, of course, they have a fixed incentive on, overseas remittances. In that context, of course, they have generated more overseas remittances for their own country because they have been putting, lucrative incentives related to that. Should we go for that as well, because Pakistan is actually, seeking more FDIs, more overseas remittances?
I think this is everything is complex, especially when we talk about the incentive. And then I just had a couple of things on the tax reform, as Ali said. So PIDE and Prime is also working on the tax reform proposal, and we will be presenting to Government of Pakistan in next week. So, and where we are trying to sell the idea that we should have to actually reduce tax rate, that give us some sort of leverage, not only to create a confidence among the business and the common community, but also will help to increase the overall tax collection. That is the underlying assumption that we are using for our reform package. So we'll definitely present to government. So this is one side of the whole of this tax reform agenda. The secondly, what kind of incentive we are looking for the common people? As you said, the Bangladesh gives incentive to the remittances. Of course, we are also have a lot of schemes for that kind of incentive, and incentives are there. But the first we should have to think the system, this economic and the economic fundamental works in a system. So you can't fix one node and leave all other as empty and you say that this system will work. So we have to understand there is a political economy of this system. There is a like the other part where there is a private sector, there is a government sector, there is lobby, and all things are working in a different dimension. So the system would be good enough that it will give a right incentive to everyone. Where the incentive are required, they must give incentive, and the incentives should be in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of own business, in terms of promoting their own businesses. So these kind of incentive people are looking for. They are not looking for subsidies. They are not looking for tax rebates. They are not looking for any other kind of support. They are looking for an environment where they can make investment with the confidence that this is their own business and they will work hard and they will earn. That could be the only way forward for us to create employment. Otherwise, if we rely on the government in terms of making these lumpy infrastructure projects, we may end up with nothing. Even with the CPEC, for CPEC, we should be very rational what kind of investment is there and how we can optimize the benefit of this CPEC. For that, we should sit together, we should understand the meaning of this CPEC. So these all kind of factors we should work on these until unless we define our clear objective. Where would be the future of Pakistan? Let's see. We aim for 1 year. The next year growth would be 6%. How we can achieve that? So for that, the key component is your private sector, is your business, where the employment is, where the growth is there. But if we increase, as just Ali said, if we increase the tax rate like GST from 17 to 18%, of course, it will increase the cost of your business. It will create a burden on the common people as well. So, of course, it will increase the inflation. Ultimately, it will reduce your economic activity. So, to promote economic activities, we should go for a reform agenda that not only look at the tax side, it should be focused on the expenditure side, and also the most important component of the reform would be how we can facilitate our businesses, how we can promote our businesses, how we can promote our indigenous investment. You talk about the 10 billion investment from the UAE, the investment from the KSA, investment from the China. We are struggling with the repayment of the profits. If we don't have any forex reserve, how we can make those payments? This is the real issue. Do we analyze that those investments would yield enough dividend, enough export, enough foreign reserve that help us to ultimately repay all the debt as well as the profit? So these are the key questions that we should consider while celebrating these investments. So currently we are celebrating and we call everything as a game changer. Right from the beginning to the end, everything is a game changer. But at the end of the game changer, we end up with the high debt and we unable to even make payment that are on the profit side.
Yes, Dr. Ali, you wanted to add something.
Dr. Ali.
To add on this point, the CPAC has brought, according to the official resources, about $30 billion investment in last 10 years. And you were, I think Farrukh was talking about job creation. And I'd like to bring, to this knowledge that the total number of jobs created in CPAC process is between 50,000 to 70,000 jobs. Now that there's not a number of jobs when you think
3 million jobs. Let me add one point. Every million we need at least 3 million jobs.
Exactly. So if you I was just doing a rough calculation. That means that for one job creation, we probably have spent about 170 million rupees. So that's a lot of investment which we have to repay. And so we need to look inward. Just FDI is not the solution. A lot of resources inside Pakistan.
Dr. Saab, with due respect, that would be down to investment design. Unfortunately, the way we actually committed to CPAC, and at that time, the kind of haste we were in, I think we did not actually structure the investment strategy properly. In coming days, we perhaps are going to get better results because now we have a very, very, strong homework done by a very competent team.
And of course, in the later phases of CPAC, of course, we are getting towards the SEZs as well. Once we get it, of course, that would ensure more jobs.
Right. I think it's best to conclude before this debate continues endlessly.
Takes off.
We're actually short of time, but thank you very much, Dr. Nasir
you
Iqbal,
very
and
much.
thank you, Dr. Ali
Thank you.
Salman, for joining us. Thank you, Farrukh and Faisal, for being part of the discussion. As always, until next time, that's all that we have from the show. We'll now see you Monday.